The Queen bred horses. She didn't go to their birthday parties, and she certainly wasn't going to Camilla's. On the 9th of April, 2005, in Windsor's Guildhall, a 56-year-old man finally married the woman he'd loved since 1971. Charles, Prince of Wales, had waited 34 years to stand beside Camilla Parker Bowles and call her his wife. His mother was notably absent from the ceremony itself. Her office blamed her position as Supreme Governor of the Church of England, an excuse that would have carried more weight if Elizabeth hadn't managed to attend far more complicated occasions when she actually wanted to. She did show up for the blessing afterward. Photographers captured her expression, someone attending a necessary dental procedure rather than celebrating her eldest son's happiness. Then came the toast. Elizabeth congratulated the couple by comparing their union to a horse race, noting that Charles had finally cleared the difficult jump at Becher's Brook. For those unfamiliar with the Grand National, Becher's Brook is the most treacherous fence on the course, famous for destroying horses, famous for ending careers. The Queen bred horses. She knew exactly what she was saying. Whether that sting was intentional or not, those present reported it landed hard. And to understand why Elizabeth's restraint that day spoke louder than any rebuke, you have to understand the woman standing beside her son, the woman who had haunted his marriage from the beginning, the woman who refused to let go. You have to understand Camilla. Camilla Rosemary Shand was born into exactly the kind of family that should have made her perfect for Charles. Her great-grandmother, Alice Keppel, had been the favorite mistress of King Edward VII, a fact Camilla reportedly found amusing rather than shameful. The Shands were wealthy, well-connected, and moved in circles that overlapped comfortably with the royal family. Her father, Bruce Shand, was a decorated war hero and successful wine merchant. Her mother, Rosalind, came from the Cubitt family, the same Cubitts who built much of Belgravia. Camilla grew up in Sussex, attended finishing school in Switzerland, and was presented as a debutante in 1965. She was, by all accounts, confident in a way that intimidated some men and attracted others. She didn't possess the delicate, fragile beauty that magazines celebrated. What she had was earthier, more substantial. She could talk to men about hunting and horses and dirty jokes, and she didn't pretend to be anything she wasn't. By the time she met Charles at a polo match in 1971, she was 24 years old and had already acquired something that would doom any chance of becoming his wife: experience. She'd dated, properly dated. Her relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles, a dashing cavalry officer and notorious womanizer, had been intermittent and passionate throughout the late 1960s. There had been others. Camilla was not, in the language of that era, suitable for the heir to the throne. The future king needed a virgin bride, someone unsullied, someone who could be molded. Camilla was already fully formed. So when she introduced herself to Charles with a line about their ancestors, Alice Keppel and Edward VII, she was establishing something other than romance. She was establishing that she understood exactly who she was and who he was, and that the usual rules might not apply. They didn't. At least, not in the way anyone expected. Charles fell for her immediately. Their connection was instant and undeniable, the kind of easy intimacy that usually takes years to develop. She made him laugh. She didn't treat him like a prince, she treated him like a man. In a life filled with deference and formality, Camilla offered something revolutionary. She teased him, and Charles did absolutely nothing about it. He didn't pursue her with any urgency. He didn't claim her. He allowed his naval duties to separate them, permitted circumstances to drift, and when Camilla, tired of waiting for a man who couldn't commit, accepted Andrew Parker Bowles's proposal in 1973, Charles reportedly wept. Here's the thing about that moment. Camilla didn't leave because she stopped loving Charles. She left because Charles wouldn't act. He had the power to choose her, to fight for her, to tell his advisors and his family that this was the woman he wanted. Instead, he listened to Lord Mountbatten counsel that she was unsuitable. He absorbed their judgment in place of his own. He watched her walk down the aisle with another man. His weakness cost him everything, and it would cost others far more. But Camilla's marriage to Andrew Parker Bowles didn't end her connection to Charles. If anything, it simplified it. As a married woman, she posed no formal threat to Charles's marital prospects. She could remain in his orbit without raising uncomfortable questions. They maintained their friendship throughout the 1970s, a friendship that most biographers agree included ongoing intimacy. Andrew Parker Bowles was hardly in a position to object. His own infidelities were legendary. He'd conducted an affair with Princess Anne before marrying Camilla, and his wandering eye didn't stop at the wedding. The Parker Bowles marriage operated on an understanding that would have scandalized ordinary people, but functioned perfectly well among a certain aristocratic set. Affairs were expected. Discretion was mandatory. Feelings were optional. So Charles continued seeing Camilla, and Camilla continued seeing Charles. Two married but not to each other people conducting a parallel relationship that everyone in their circle knew about and no one discussed publicly. Then, Charles needed a wife. Lady Diana Frances Spencer was 16 years old when she first registered on Charles's romantic radar during a shooting weekend at Althorpe in November 1977. He'd actually been dating her sister Sarah at the time. But something about Diana, her freshness, her youth, her seemingly uncomplicated sweetness, lodged in his memory. She was the daughter of an earl. Her family had served the royals for generations. Her background was impeccable in the way that mattered to palace courtiers. And in the cold calculus that governed royal bride selection, she was young enough to be shaped, innocent enough to be unsullied by scandal, naive enough to accept the terms of a bargain she couldn't possibly have understood. When Charles began seriously courting Diana in 1980, the gap between them was vast in every dimension that mattered. He was 31, a man of the world who'd lived on naval ships and toured the globe, who'd conducted affairs and developed fixed opinions and settled into patterns of behavior that wouldn't bend. She was 19, a kindergarten teaching assistant living in a flat with girlfriends. Her romantic experience was negligible. She was, in every meaningful sense, a girl. And Charles was asking her to become a princess while keeping Camilla as his emotional anchor. The engagement interview should have told Diana everything she needed to know. Broadcast on the 24th of February, 1981, it contained a moment that would haunt her for the rest of her life. When the television journalist asked the couple if they were in love, Diana's response was immediate and unguarded. "Of course." Then came Charles's reply, "Whatever in love means." The entire world witnessed his hedging. The entire world understood what it meant. Diana would later describe the moment as traumatic, a wound that never healed because it was inflicted so publicly, so casually, and so early. But here's the thing about Charles. He told her the truth that day. She just wasn't listening. And Camilla? Camilla was still there, still calling, still receiving calls, still occupying the space in Charles's heart that his fiancée assumed would be hers. The bracelet incident crystallized everything Diana would later discover about her position. Approximately 2 weeks before her wedding, Diana visited the office of Michael Colborne, Charles's personal secretary. There she discovered a gold bracelet from Asprey's, an expensive piece featuring a lapis lazuli pendant engraved with 2 letters, G and F, Gladys and Fred. The pet names Charles and Camilla had given each other, borrowed from a favorite radio comedy called The Goon Show. Private names, intimate names, names that spoke of a connection Diana could never touch. Diana confronted Charles. He admitted the bracelet was a farewell gift for Camilla. A farewell gift, as if this were an ending. He delivered it to her personally, 2 days before the wedding. Think about that. The man who couldn't quite say "I love you" on television had arranged a secret farewell gift for his mistress. He'd inscribed it with private endearments. He'd slipped away to present it in person just 48 hours before pledging his troth at Westminster Abbey. He could have sent it by courier. He could have given it weeks earlier. He chose to deliver it himself in the final days before his wedding. And Camilla accepted it. She didn't refuse the gift. She didn't tell Charles to focus on his bride. She took the bracelet engraved with their secret names and kept the connection alive. The wedding itself, on the 29th of July, 1981, was watched by an estimated 750 million people worldwide, the most viewed broadcast in television history to that point. Diana walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey in a dress whose train stretched 25 feet, her face half hidden by a veil, her age just barely 20. The Archbishop of Canterbury pronounced them man and wife. The bells rang out across London. Diana emerged onto the Buckingham Palace balcony to wave at the cheering crowds, who genuinely believed they were witnessing a fairy tale. The honeymoon revealed the truth. During their Mediterranean cruise aboard the royal yacht Britannia, Diana discovered photographs of Camilla among Charles's belongings. She found cufflinks engraved with 2 interlocking C's, a gift from Camilla that Charles had chosen to bring on his honeymoon. She sat through dinners where Charles read books rather than conversing with his new bride. By Diana's own account, she understood within weeks that she had made a terrible mistake, that her husband loved someone else, that she had been selected not for herself, but for her suitability, her youth, her virginity, her bloodline, her willingness to perform a role that had nothing to do with partnership and everything to do with production of heirs. She had just turned 20, and she was trapped. Charles resumed his relationship with Camilla within 5 years of his wedding. The exact date is contested. Some biographers place the resumption as early as 1984, others in 1986. But the essential fact is undeniable. Charles broke his marriage vows and returned to the woman he'd refused to give up in the first place. Every action Charles took during this period was a choice. He chose to contact Camilla. He chose to arrange meetings. He chose to maintain a parallel relationship rather than working to repair his marriage. And every time he called Camilla, every time he arranged a secret meeting, every time he chose her company over his wife's, Camilla chose to answer. She chose to meet him. She chose to remain the third person in a marriage that was drowning under the weight of her presence. The phone call recorded on the night of the 17th and 18th of December, 1989, proved it. When transcripts of Tampongate appeared in the Sunday People and the Sunday Mirror in January 1993, they revealed Charles and Camilla speaking with the easy intimacy of longtime lovers. 8 years into Charles's marriage, while Diana was still formally his wife and the mother of his young children, this wasn't a single lapse. This was a sustained, parallel relationship, and Camilla was an equal participant in every moment of it. Diana's response to the revelation came in November 1995, when she sat down with Martin Becher for her BBC Panorama interview. When she delivered the line that would define the entire tragedy, she spoke it simply, without melodrama. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. The sentence contained everything: the betrayal, the humiliation, the loneliness of a woman who had entered marriage expecting partnership and discovered instead that she was sharing her husband with a ghost who refused to disappear. The word Diana used, in recorded conversations and interviews documented by those closest to her, was sacrifice. She stated that she felt she had been offered up, a lamb to slaughter, as she reportedly told friends, for an institution that needed her youth and fertility and photogenic presence, but never valued her as a person. Diana called herself a lamb to slaughter, and lambs don't sacrifice themselves. Someone leads them to the altar. On the 31st of August, 1997, Diana died in a Paris tunnel. She was 36 years old. The public reaction was unlike anything Britain had experienced. Grief erupted into something close to rage, and much of that rage found a target: Camilla. The press, which had oscillated between fascination and condemnation for years, now turned fully hostile. Tabloids christened her the Rottweiler, a reference both to her perceived aggression in pursuing Charles and, cruelly, to her appearance. When she ventured out in public, people threw bread rolls at her in supermarkets. Her home was besieged by photographers. Death threats arrived regularly. For nearly 2 years after Diana's death, Camilla essentially disappeared from public life. She retreated to her home in Wiltshire, avoided London, and waited for the fury to subside. Charles, meanwhile, faced a choice. He could abandon Camilla, distance himself from the woman the public blamed for Diana's unhappiness, or he could do what he'd never done before. He could finally fight for her. The campaign to rehabilitate Camilla's image was given an internal code name: Operation PB. PB stood for Parker Bowles. It was orchestrated primarily by Mark Boland, Charles's deputy private secretary and spin doctor, who understood that public opinion could be manufactured with sufficient patience and skill. The strategy was methodical, subtle, calculated to unfold over years rather than months. First, Camilla would reappear in controlled settings, charity events, carefully managed photographs, establishing her presence without demanding acceptance. Then, she would be photographed with Charles in public, normalizing their relationship. Then, gradually, she would meet the royal family. Each step was designed to inch public sentiment from hostility toward tolerance, from tolerance toward acceptance. The Ritz Hotel exit in January 1999 was the first major milestone. Charles and Camilla left through the front entrance together, knowing photographers were waiting. It was the first time they'd been photographed as a couple in public. The image was transmitted worldwide within hours. The papers ran it, the public reacted, and nothing catastrophic happened. Boland's team had proven something crucial. The world wouldn't end if Charles and Camilla were seen together. The fury of 1997 had cooled to something more manageable. The meeting with Prince William was perhaps the most delicate operation of all. William had been 15 when his mother died. His feelings toward Camilla, the woman Diana had blamed for destroying her marriage, were complicated at best. Any perception that Charles was forcing his sons to accept his mistress would have been disastrous. The meeting was arranged for June 1998 at Charles's residence, St. James's Palace. It lasted approximately 30 minutes. No photographs were taken. No statements were issued. By all accounts, William was polite, reserved. He didn't embrace Camilla. He didn't reject her. He endured the meeting with the stoic composure he would later become famous for. It was enough. The meeting had happened. The precedent was set. Camilla could be introduced to the family, one member at a time. Harry's meeting followed, then other relatives. Each encounter was managed, reported, and absorbed by the public consciousness. The Queen's resistance remained the final obstacle. Elizabeth II's treatment of Camilla tells you everything about where her sympathies lay. For years after the divorce, and then after Diana's death, she refused to be in the same room as her son's mistress. When Charles hosted events, Camilla's presence meant the Queen's absence. Royal correspondence documented this as deliberate avoidance. Charles pushed for acceptance. Elizabeth resisted. It took until June 2000, 3 years after Diana's death, for the Queen to consent to being at the same event as Camilla. A 60th birthday party for the former King Constantine of Greece. Even then, their interaction was minimal and reportedly awkward. Their first substantial meeting didn't occur until 2001, a full decade after Charles and Diana's separation. Witnesses described it as formal and brief. The Queen was allowing time to erode public memory, letting the Diana years recede before permitting her son's mistress any proximity to the family fold. The Golden Jubilee celebrations in 2002 marked another cautious step forward. Camilla attended some events, though never at the Queen's side, never in prominent positions, never in ways that could be interpreted as full acceptance. Elizabeth was not forgiving Camilla. She was acknowledging reality. There is a difference. When Charles and Camilla finally married in 2005, nearly 8 years after Diana's death, Elizabeth's posture remained one of minimal endorsement. She attended the blessing but not the civil ceremony. She offered a toast that commentators found notably lacking in warmth, the Becher's Brook comparison that opened this story. She permitted the marriage because she could no longer prevent it, but she gave no appearance of celebration. She had watched her son fail to choose Camilla when he was young enough to make it work. She had watched him select an innocent teenage girl as a substitute, a human shield against the expectations of duty. She had watched that girl suffer, struggle, and ultimately die in a Paris tunnel, still only 36 years old. And she had watched Camilla wait, patient, present, never quite letting go. Camilla is now queen consort. She sits beside Charles at state occasions, wears the crown jewels, performs the duties Diana was recruited to perform and ultimately couldn't survive. She got everything she wanted. It just took 34 years, 1 destroyed marriage, and a death in a Paris tunnel. The question of whether she deserved it depends entirely on how you assign blame, on whether you believe she was a villain or simply a woman who loved a weak man and refused to walk away from him. The Queen seemed to have her answer. She attended the wedding blessing with the enthusiasm of someone fulfilling an unpleasant contractual obligation. She compared their union to a fence that kills horses. She never fully embraced Camilla, not really, even after the wedding, even in the years that followed. Elizabeth understood something about duty that her son never grasped. You don't get to have everything you want. You choose your obligations and you honor them, even when it costs you. Charles wanted Camilla. He also wanted to be king. He wasn't willing to sacrifice either desire, so he found someone else to sacrifice instead, a 19-year-old girl who believed in fairy tales. So here's the question that doesn't have an easy answer. Who deserves more blame, the weak man who couldn't choose, or the woman who refused to let him go? Charles, who lacked the courage to claim Camilla openly when he had the chance, who married a teenager he didn't love because she met the requirements, who maintained an affair for years while his wife crumbled under the weight of his indifference. Or Camilla, who accepted the bracelet engraved with their private names just days before his wedding, who answered every phone call, who waited in the shadows while Diana publicly suffered, who emerged victorious after the funeral flowers had wilted. The Queen never said it outright. That's not how the Queen worked. She made her judgments known through absences, through coldness, through carefully calibrated distance, through a toast that compared her son's marriage to a fence famous for killing horses. Diana called herself a lamb to slaughter, and someone had to hold the knife. Subscribe for more stories like this.